thoughts muted into focused determination. Even little Sora, shivering but wide-eyed, clung to Hannah's sleeve. Hannah's heart ached at the sight of these fragile souls, yet she knew this night was more than a test of the orchard. It was a crucible for their healing. "We must cover the trees," Hannah said softly, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "Every branch, every sapling, they are our future." The group moved swiftly, struggling to secure tarps and wooden stakes against the rising storm. Yuki and Mika joined them, steady and strong, lending hands and calm words. The village, though battered by grief, gathered in a circle of resolve around the orchard. Rain soaked through their clothes, chilled them to the bone, but no one faltered. At one point, a sudden gust threatened to rip away a cover, and Hannah lunged forward, grasping at the wet fabric with trembling hands. "Hold on!" she called, her voice cracking but fierce. Kiko and Taro rushed to help, their fingers numb but unyielding. The saplings trembled beneath their shelter, fragile yet enduring. Hours passed in a blur of cold and exhaustion. Hannah felt the weight of her own sorrow press heavily against her chest, but she pushed it down, drawing strength from the children's presence. She whispered encouragements, their names a litany against the storm's rage. Taro, his face pale and soaked, found a small pocket of relative shelter beneath a large tree. From his soaked backpack, he pulled out a soaked notebook and a stub of pencil. With shaking hands, he began to sketch lightning striking the dark sky, the battered trees, the steadfast figures holding fast. His drawing was a quiet rebellion against despair, a testament that even in chaos, beauty could persist. Kiko, usually so quick to argue and resist, surprised Hannah. She moved silently among the saplings, adjusting the tarps, pressing stakes deeper into the ground, working with a focused intensity that spoke of a profound internal shift. The defiance in her sharp eyes softened, replaced by a fierce protectiveness not just for the trees, but for the fragile hope they embodied. The night stretched on, the storm's fury unabated. At times, Hannah felt her strength wane, her fingers numb, her body trembling. Yet, each time she faltered, the children's presence anchored her. Their shared struggle forged a bond stronger than words, a quiet promise that together they would endure. Outside, the wind screamed like a living thing, tearing at the fabric of their shelter. The rain hammered the earth, flooding the small paths and turning the soil to mud. But inside the circle of their steadfast care, the apricot orchard survived. The saplings bent but did not break, cradled by hands determined to nurture life even in the harshest of nights. As the first pale fingers of dawn brushed the horizon, the storm began to relent. The rain softened to a drizzle. The wind dropped to a whisper. Hannah stood amidst the drenched orchard, the children gathered close, their faces drawn and wary, but their eyes bright with quiet triumph. She reached out, touching the bark of a young tree, slick with rain, leaves trembling in the cooling morning air. "We made it," she whispered, voice thick with tears she did not shame. Around her the children nodded, a fragile smile breaking across Kiko's lips, a steady gaze from Taro that held a new light. The night had tested them, pushed them to the edge of their endurance. But it had also woven them closer, rooted them as deeply as the apricot trees they had fought to save. In the silence after the storm, Hannah felt the stirring of something fragile and fierce, hope. Yet she knew this was not the end. The orchard still needed care, the village still needed healing. But tonight, they had stood together against the wild forces of nature and sorrow. Tonight, they had survived not just the storm, but the darkness within. And as the first apricot blossoms would soon bloom, so too would the quiet resilience of this small village, rising from the ruins, singing the song of falling apricots. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence thick and heavy, as if the earth itself was catching its breath. Dawn crept slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in muted strokes of gray and pale gold. I stepped outside my small home, the air cool and damp against my skin. Breathing in the scent of wet earth mingled with the faint sweetness of crushed apricot blossoms scattered across the ground. The orchard was battered but standing, branches hung low, heavy with rain and bruised fruit, some broken and scattered like fragile memories strewn across the soil. I moved among the saplings, each one a testament to the delicate balance between fragility and strength. My fingers brushed the rough bark, feeling the pulse of life beneath, steady and enduring. It was in this quiet communion that I found a whisper of comfort, a gentle assurance that even after the darkest night, dawn would come. From the edge of the orchard, I saw the children emerging from the shadows of their shelters, faces streaked with dirt and rain, eyes wide but bright with a tentative spark. Taro was the first to approach, clutching his notebook close to his chest, as if it were a talisman against the lingering fear. Kiko followed, her usual defiance softened by exhaustion, her gaze lingering on the damaged trees as if searching for signs of hope. "They're still here," I said softly, more to myself than to them. "They survived." Taro nodded, a small smile flickering at the corners of his lips. "Like us," he whispered. We gathered together beneath the heavy boughs, the broken breeze carrying the scent of rain and earth. Grandmother Sato joined us, her stooped figure silhouetted against the growing light. Her silver hair, damp from the storm, clung to her temples as she began to speak in her calm, steady voice. "There is an old story," she said, "of a tree that faced many winters, its branches battered by wind and snow. Each season, it seemed to lose more than it could bear, yet in spring, it blossomed anew, reminding us that endings are but beginnings in disguise." Her words settled over us like a balm, weaving together the threads of sorrow and hope. The children listened intently, their grief tempered by the promise of renewal. Mika appeared then, carrying a basket of herbs and bandages. She moved with practiced grace, tending to small cuts and bruises, her presence a quiet comfort. Yuki arrived soon after, his hands calloused but gentle as he began inspecting the wooden supports he had built for the orchard. His calm diligence was a steadying force amid the fragile aftermath. Together we began to clear the debris, our movements slow but purposeful. The earth beneath our feet was soft, yielding to the touch, fertile despite the storm's fury. As I watched the children work side by side, I saw in their faces the first glimmers of something I had thought lost hope. It was a fragile thing, delicate as the apricot blossoms, but it was there, growing. That night, as I sat by the window, the moon casting silvery light over the orchard, I allowed myself to feel the weight of what we had endured. The impermanence of suffering was a lesson cruelly taught, yet within it lay the strength of endurance. We were like the trees, battered, bruised, but still standing, still reaching toward the light. Taro's sketches now filled with scenes of resilience, twisted branches blooming against gray skies. Kiko's sharp eyes held a softer light, her resistance giving way to quiet acceptance. The village, scarred but unbroken, was beginning to breathe again. In the quiet aftermath, beneath the battered apricot trees, the song of falling petals whispered a promise that even in loss, life would find a way to bloom once more. And in that promise, I found a fragile peace, the first step toward healing not just for myself, but for all of us. The storm had tested us, laid bare our fears and our fragility. But it had also shown us the strength that comes from standing together, rooted in shared grief and hope. As dawn broke fully, spilling warm light across the land, I felt a tentative but unshakable certainty: we would endure, we would grow, and from the darkness we would rise. Yet even as the village stirred awake, I knew this was but one moment in a longer journey. The road ahead would be hard, paved with memories and challenges yet unseen. But for now, beneath the battered branches and the soft, falling petals, we had found a beginning, and that was enough to carry us forward, step by fragile step. The first light of spring seeped softly into the village, painting the apricot orchard with the delicate hues of dawn. Hannah stood at the edge of the grove, her breath catching gently as the blossoms stirred in the morning breeze. Pale pink petals, fragile and fleeting, danced like whispers in the air, their scent mingling with the damp earth beneath her feet. It was a sight she had longed for through the cold months, a quiet promise that life could indeed bloom anew amid the traces of loss. Around her, the children gathered hesitantly, their faces still shadowed by the weight of the past, but brightened by the tender spectacle before them. Taro knelt with his notebook, carefully sketching the buds and flowers, his dark eyes reflecting the soft light. Kiko stood apart, arms crossed, but her sharp gaze softened by the tender scene unfolding. Even she seemed caught in the fragile magic of the moment. Hannah walked slowly beneath the branches, her fingers brushing over the petals, each touch a silent benediction. The trees, once mere saplings planted over graves, had grown into a living tribute, fragile yet resilient, much like the village itself. She thought of the storm that had threatened to undo their efforts, the nights spent shielding the orchard from the winds, and the countless moments of doubt and sorrow. Yet here they were, blossoming, breathing alive. Grandmother Sato approached, her silver hair catching the light as she settled beneath the largest tree. Her voice, steady and warm, wove a story of ancestors who had planted apricot trees to honor the dead and celebrate the fleeting beauty of life. The children listened, some skeptical, others rapt, as the elders' words bridged the past with the present, reminding them that memory was not a chain but a root from which new growth sprang. Kiko shifted closer, her defiant stance softened by the elder's tale. Hannah noted the subtle change and opening, a willingness to embrace rather than resist. Taro's sketches grew more detailed, his quiet grief finding expression in the delicate lines of petals and branches. As the afternoon deepened, villagers began to gather, drawn by the promise of the orchard's bloom. Micah arrived with a basket of herbs, offering fragrant teas that mingled with the scent of apricot flowers. Yuki brought sturdy benches fashioned from fallen trees, their rough edges softened by the hands of those who had rebuilt much of the village. Laughter and soft melodies floated on the breeze, weaving through the orchard like a balm. The small celebration was humble but profound, a communal embrace of impermanence and renewal. Hannah watched as children chased drifting petals, their laughter light and unburdened, a fragile joy taking root. She felt the stirring of peace deep within, a quiet acceptance that life's beauty was found not in permanence, but in the fleeting, in the moments that shone briefly before fading. As dusk settled, the orchard bathed in the golden glow of lanterns. Hannah lingered beneath the blossoms. She whispered a prayer to the wind, a song of gratitude for the promise of spring, for the strength born of sorrow, and for the hope blossoming in every falling apricot. The village, once shattered, was waking softly, steadily to the possibility of new beginnings. And yet, as the petals fell like gentle rain, Hannah knew that the journey was far from over. The orchard's bloom was but one chapter in their shared story, a delicate song of impermanence, memory, and the enduring power of love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moments to cherish and endure. But for now, beneath the soft canopy of flowering branches, hope blossomed with a quiet, resilient grace. The wind carried the scent of apricots through the village streets, a subtle reminder that life, like the petals, was meant to be treasured even as it slipped away. Hannah took a deep breath, feeling the promise of spring settle within her heart, ready to face the days ahead with a gentle strength born of sorrow and the beauty of impermanence. "Look," she whispered to the children gathered near, "even the petals that fall nourish the earth. So do our memories nourish our hearts." Taro smiled softly and Kiko nodded, a fragile peace resting in their eyes. The village was waking, the orchard blooming, and with each falling apricot, a new song began, one of healing, hope, and the endless cycles of life. The promise of spring was theirs, and Hannah knew they would hold it, tender and true, beneath the ever-changing sky. The morning sun cast a gentle glow over the apricot orchard, where delicate pink blossoms trembled softly in the light breeze. I stood among the saplings with the children, my hands steady but heart full of quiet anticipation. Today was a day unlike any before, one where we would not only tend to the trees, but also honor the memories rooted deeply in the soil beneath them. "Come, gather close," I said softly, beckoning the children to form a small circle. Their eyes, a mixture of curiosity and lingering sorrow, followed me as I reached into the woven basket at my feet. Inside lay small wooden plaques, each carefully inscribed with the names of those they had lost, their parents, siblings, grandparents. Each name was a whispered echo of love and loss, carved with care as if to capture the essence of those who had vanished too soon. Taro took his plaque with trembling hands. I noticed the way his dark eyes lingered on the smooth wood, the weight of his grief balanced by a quiet determination. Beside him, Kiko's fingers clenched tightly around hers. I caught the flicker of defiance in her sharp gaze, but also sensed the fragile thread of acceptance beginning to weave through her heart. These plaques, I explained, are not just markers, they are bridges between the past and the present. Every time we care for the apricot trees, we remember those who nurtured us with their love. Through this, they live on in the gentle sway of branches and the bloom of petals. Grandmother Sato, her silver hair catching the sunlight like strands of woven moonlight, stepped forward with a smile that held centuries of wisdom. In our ancestors' stories, she began, her voice a warm embrace, the apricot tree is a symbol of resilience. It blooms even after the harshest winters and storms. It teaches us that life continues, even when it seems broken. The children listened, some nodding, others silent, their faces reflecting the deep stillness of the moment. I watched as Taro sank down beneath the boughs, his sketchbook open on his lap. His pencil moved swiftly, tracing the delicate petals with a tenderness I had not seen in weeks. Through his art, Taro was speaking a language of healing, one that words had yet to find. Kiko remained standing, her usual defiant stance softened by the dappled light filtering through the trees. After a long pause, she stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hannah," she said, "I'm scared. I don't want to forget them, but maybe I can hold them differently now." Her confession hung in the air, fragile as the blossoms around us. I reached out, gently touching her shoulder. "That's all any of us can do," I replied. "Hold them in our hearts, and let the trees carry their memories forward." The ritual began as the children knelt by their respective apricot trees, planting the plaques carefully into the earth. Their fingers brushed the soil, mingling grief with hope, sorrow with renewal. The village elders looked on, their warm smiles a testament to the enduring spirit of our community. As the morning stretched into afternoon, the orchard seemed to breathe with us, each rustle of leaves a whispered prayer, each falling petal a fleeting moment of beauty and remembrance. In that sacred space, the boundaries between past and present blurred, and the seeds of memory took root alongside the saplings. I found myself caught between the melancholy of loss and the gentle promise of rebirth, a feeling that ebbed and flowed like the tides. The children's laughter, soft and tentative, began to mingle with the songs of birds returning to the branches. It was a symphony of healing, composed in the key of impermanence. As dusk painted the sky in hues of lavender and gold, I gathered the children once more beneath the blossoming canopy. "Remember," I said, "each petal that falls is a song of those who came before us, and a promise that life, in all its fleeting beauty, continues." Kiko's eyes glistened as she nodded, and Taro's smile, quiet but genuine, warmed the chill of evening. Grandmother Sato's stories had sewn threads of continuity into our hearts, binding us to the past even as we stepped forward into the unknown. In the stillness that followed, I felt the weight of my own grief lighten, carried away on the breeze with the falling apricot petals. The orchard was no longer just a place of sorrow, but a living testament to resilience, memory, and hope, a sanctuary where the seeds of memory blossomed alongside the promise of tomorrow. And so, beneath the gentle watch of the blooming apricot trees, we planted not only wood and roots, but also the fragile beginnings of healing, each one a testament to the enduring power of love and remembrance. The days ahead would not be without sorrow, but they would be filled with the quiet strength that comes from embracing impermanence and finding beauty in every fleeting moment. For in the song of falling apricots, we had discovered a melody of hope that would carry us through the seasons to come. As night settled over the village, I lingered under a tree, feeling the soft petals brush against my cheek like whispered blessings. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew within the fragile bloom of each apricot flower there was the promise of new life, new memories, and the gentle courage to move forward. And so, with a heart both heavy and hopeful, I closed my eyes and listened to the orchard song, the song of falling apricots, carrying us all toward the light of a new spring. The gentle hum of bees and the soft rustling of apricot blossoms filled the air as I wandered slowly through the orchard. This place, once scarred and silent, now bloomed with life and laughter. Each tree stood as a testament not merely to survival, but to the strength we had forged together, rooted deep in the soil of our shared sorrow. It had not been an easy journey. I remembered the early days, when grief lay heavy like an unyielding fog, and the children's eyes reflected the storm within their hearts. Yet, here they were, Taro carefully sketching the delicate petals of flowers, Kiko offering steady hands to Grandmother Sato's gentle guidance, and all of us bound by the quiet promise of new beginnings. Taro approached, holding out a worn notebook. "Look," he said softly, his voice steady but humble. I bent to see the lines and shades he had drawn, the orchard in full bloom, alive with color and light. It was more than art. It was hope etched on paper. "It's beautiful, Taro," I whispered. "You've captured something very important." A subtle smile touched his lips. "I think I'm beginning to understand." Meanwhile, Kiko moved nearby. Her sharp eyes softened as she planted a new sapling beside Grandmother Sato. The defiance that once marked her stance had melted into a quiet determination, reflecting acceptance rather than resistance. Watching her, I felt a swell of pride, not just for her, but for all of us who had learned to embrace impermanence and find strength in vulnerability. The village itself had changed. Once fractured by loss and uncertainty, it now pulsed with a renewed energy. Meika's herbal remedies soothed more than aching bodies, they comforted souls. Yuki's steady hands rebuilt not only homes but hope itself. Our community was knitting itself back together, thread by delicate thread. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in hues of pink and lavender, the villagers gathered beneath the blossoming trees. Lanterns flickered gently, casting warm pools of light on faces lined with memory and resilience. Stories were shared, tales of ancestors who had weathered their own storms, of apricot trees that had stood as silent witnesses to generations of life and death. I found myself speaking quietly, my voice steady yet touched with emotion. "These trees," I said, "carry our memories. They remind us that even in loss, there is beauty. Even in endings, there is a beginning." A hush fell over the crowd, broken only by the soft sigh of the evening breeze through the branches. In that moment, I understood fully, this orchard was more than a garden. It was the heart of our village, beating anew with every blossom and every falling apricot. As the night deepened, I lingered beneath the branches, feeling the weight of what we had built, not just in soil and wood, but in spirit. The roots of these trees had intertwined with the roots of our lives, binding us together in ways both fragile and unbreakable. And as I closed my eyes, I heard the faint, sweet song of falling apricots, a melody of grief transformed and hope reborn. But even as peace settled over us, I knew the journey was far from over. The seasons would turn, and with them, new challenges would come. Yet, with these roots binding us, I felt ready to face whatever future awaited, carrying forward the legacy of resilience and love that these trees and this village embodied. The orchard whispered its promise: we would endure together, and so we would. The village had settled into a rhythm that was neither hurried nor stagnant, but rather a delicate balance between remembrance and renewal. Each morning, as the sun stretched its pale fingers over the horizon, I found myself drawn outside before the day's work began. The apricot orchard, once a fragile promise of hope, had grown into a living testament of perseverance. The branches, heavy with blooms and blushes of soft pink and white, swayed gently in the spring breeze, their petals falling like whispered prayers on the earth beneath. I often sat beneath one of the larger trees, its gnarled limbs a familiar embrace, and let the quiet wash over me. The hum of village life stirred softly in the distance, the faint clatter of wooden carts, the distant laughter of children playing, the rhythmic tapping of Yuki's hammer shaping planks for a new home. Each sound was a thread woven into the tapestry of healing. Taro was often nearby, perched on the low stone wall that bordered the orchard. His sketchbook was never far from his hands, and I watched him with a quiet pride as he captured the orchard's essence in delicate pencil strokes. His eyes, once shadowed by survivor's guilt, now gleamed with a subtle peace. I saw in his drawings not just the trees, but the light and shadow of memory itself, how the past and present intertwined with the world around us. Sometimes he would glance up and offer me a shy smile before returning his focus to the page. Kiko had changed as well, though her transformation was more gradual, like the slow unfolding of a tight bud. I saw her one afternoon helping grandmother Sato weave flower garlands from fresh blossoms gathered at the orchard's edge. Their hands worked side by side, fingers nimble and careful, as stories from the village's past flowed between them in soft, shared laughter. The defiant spark in Kiko's eyes had softened, replaced by a quiet strength born from acceptance. It was a subtle but profound shift, one that mirrored the delicate balance of life and loss we all carried. Grandmother Sato's presence remained a steady anchor for us all. Her stories of the apricot trees and ancestors wove a sense of continuity through the community, reminding us that we were part of an unbroken chain of resilience. Her silver hair caught the sunlight as she sat among the children, her warm eyes conveying both wisdom and gentle humor. She spoke often of impermanence not as an end, but as a cycle in which all things found their place. Her words settled in our hearts like seeds, waiting for the right moment to bloom. Meka continued her quiet vigilance, tending to those who sought comfort in her herbal remedies. Her presence was a balm for many, including myself, as we navigated the unpredictable tides of grief. Yuki's practical hands had rebuilt much of what the landslide had taken, his craftsmanship visible in every sturdy beam and carefully placed support in the orchard. Together, they embodied the spirit of collaboration and hope that had taken root alongside the trees. In the evenings, the village gathered beneath the orchard's blossoming canopy. Lanterns flickered softly, casting a warm glow that danced on the petals and faces alike. I led the children and neighbors in a remembrance ritual, a quiet honoring of those we had lost and the lives we continued to nurture. The scent of apricot blossoms mingled with the earth's cool breath, creating a sacred space where grief and gratitude coexisted. The children's voices, once hesitant and broken, now rose in gentle song, a melody of healing that carried through the night. As I looked around at the faces illuminated by lantern light, the tentative smiles, the steady gazes, the gentle touches, I felt the weight of our shared journey. The scars left by the landslide would never fully fade, but they no longer defined us. Instead, they had become the roots from which new life grew, nourished by memory, love, and the quiet resilience of a community bound by loss and hope. I pressed my hand against the rough bark of the apricot tree above me, feeling the pulse of life beneath the surface. In this moment, surrounded by the gentle hum of renewal, I understood that grief was not a chain to bind us, but a river to guide us toward acceptance. The village, once shattered, now stood quietly resilient, carrying forward the legacy of those who had gone before, their memory alive in every falling apricot and every breath of spring air. And as the petals drifted down around us like a soft, ephemeral snowfall, I whispered a promise to nurture this fragile beauty, this song of impermanence, until it blossomed into something enduring and whole. The soft rustle of apricot petals filled the air like a whispered song, a delicate cascade of pink and white that fluttered down through the dappled sunlight. I stood beneath the blossoming trees, the branches heavy with flowers that seemed to glow with an inner light. The scent was sweet and faint, a gentle fragrance that mingled with the earthiness of spring rain still lingering in the soil. Around me, the children played quietly, their laughter a tender melody woven into the stillness. For a long moment, I simply breathed in the scene, letting the fragile beauty of the apricot orchard settle deep inside me. This was the place where sorrow had once rooted itself so firmly, where the landslide had torn through our lives with merciless force. And yet, here we were alive, growing fragile but unyielding. The trees, just as the village, had endured storms, loss, and fear. Now their blossoms were a living testament to the truth I had come to understand, that life was a cycle of falling and rising, loss and rebirth. Impermanence was not an enemy but a teacher. Taro sat nearby, his slender fingers carefully turning the pages of his sketchbook. His eyes, dark and thoughtful, traced the falling petals as if trying to capture their fleeting flight with graphite and ink. I watched him for a moment, how far he had come from the withdrawn boy, who once hid behind silence and shadow. His art had become his voice, a gentle bridge between memory and hope. Kiko stood apart from the others, her usual defiance softened into something almost reverent. She reached out a hand, letting a single petal rest on her palm before it drifted away in the breeze. I caught the flicker of vulnerability in her sharp eyes, the quiet acceptance that had taken root after months of resistance. It was a fragile thing, this piece, but no less precious for its delicacy. Grandmother Sato's voice rose softly from a shaded corner of the orchard, where she sat on a weathered bench surrounded by the younger children, including little Sora, whose wide eyes drank in every word. She told us stories of the apricot trees, tales passed down through generations of how their blossoms symbolized the fleeting nature of life, the beauty found in moments that could never be held forever. Her stories wove the past into the present, binding us to the roots of the village and the ancestors who had loved this land long before tragedy had struck. I stepped closer to the bench, my fingers brushing the rough wood as I listened. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows and painting the sky with soft hues of pink and gold. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath in this quiet hour, suspended between day and night, between what had been and what was yet to come. Hana Mika's gentle voice broke through my reverie. She approached, carrying a small basket of herbs and flowers she had gathered from the forest's edge. Her eyes, warm and kind, met mine with unspoken understanding. "They bloom beautifully this year." I nodded, a quiet smile touching my lips. "Yes." Like a song, soft, fleeting, but unforgettable. Yuki appeared then, his broad frame moving steadily through the orchard. He carried a handmade wooden frame, built to support the younger saplings through the coming summer winds. His presence was a reminder of how much the village had rebuilt not just homes and roads, but the very fabric of our lives. Together, we stood beneath the apricot trees, surrounded by children who had found new families in one another. The orchard was alive with gentle movement, the flutter of petals, the whisper of leaves, the soft murmur of voices sharing stories, laughter and tears. I thought of the long months that had passed since the landslide, the storms we had weathered, the nights filled with fear and exhaustion. Each moment had been a thread in the tapestry. We were weaving a tapestry of grief and healing, impermanence and hope. As the petals fell like a tender rain, I felt a profound peace settle within me. This was the song of falling apricots, a melody of endings and beginnings that played softly in the heart of the village. It was a reminder that even in loss, there was beauty. Even in impermanence, a promise of renewal. I closed my eyes and let the petals brush my face, their cool touch grounding me in the present. The future was uncertain, as it always was, but here, beneath these blooming branches, I found courage to face it with open hands and a hopeful heart. "Come, children," I called softly, my voice steady and warm. "Let us honor those we carry in our hearts and celebrate the life we nurture together." One by one, they gathered around me. Taro held his sketchbook close, Kiko's sharp eyes now softened with a quiet light, and little Sora reached out eagerly to catch a falling petal. Grandmother Sato began an ancient song, her voice steady and sure, weaving a thread of continuity through the orchard's gentle hush. The village, once broken and silent, now breathed as one beneath the apricot trees. We were bound by roots deeper than soil and stone, roots of memory, love, and the unyielding hope that even the most delicate blossom would fall only to give way to new life. And so the song of falling apricots carried on, a timeless melody that would echo through seasons yet to come, reminding us all that in impermanence, there is grace, and in every ending, a new beginning waits to bloom. The petals swirled around me like a soft, fragrant rain, and I whispered a silent promise to hold the past gently, to nurture the present tenderly, and to walk forward with the quiet strength of the apricot trees. As twilight deepened and the first stars began to shimmer, A sense of stillness settled over the orchard. Yet beneath that stillness, life pulsed quietly, steadily, a living testament to the enduring power of love, memory, and the fragile beauty of impermanence. And in that moment, I knew we were truly home.